Buenos dias. A round of applause for Camille. Thank you, Camille, for that wonderful introduction. Were you doing that thing that they say, stall for time? He's in the room, he's getting mic'd up. Everybody turned around like, what's taking you so long to get mic'd up? As I walked in, someone was saying that they'd heard that when I was starting a fellowship at the Annie Casey Foundation with my good friend Linda Sato, they said that I had received the reputation for always being the straggler because I wanted to say hi to everyone and shake everyone's hand. And then sure enough, I got called out for doing exactly that this morning. I want to start by acknowledging that yesterday the governor announced a proclamation recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day in the state of California. His message, as it has been throughout this year, has been about resilience, about Native people overcoming and being resilient. And I'd like to make a general invitation for any of you who are interested. The California Department of Education and the State Board of Education is leading a conversation about how we talk about ethnic studies in the state of California. And recognizing that there's some 200 school districts in the state that already have an ethnic studies curriculum, the State Department of Education is helping to provide a resource guide, a model ethnic studies curriculum guide that will talk about the contributions of Indigenous people and African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to make sure that our young people, that's a great place to put your hands together. Yeah, we can put our hands together there. To make sure that our young people see the contributions that their ancestors have made in this great state and in this great nation in a way that will help to lift them up, in a way that will help them to be proud, in a way that will help us close this pervasive gap that has allowed many of our students to not receive the same education, the same opportunities as their peers from other groups. And so 10 o'clock today, if you're not busy doing something here, come to the Department of Education and be a part of our conversation about ethnic studies, how we support Native people and others who have historically been featured in the ethnic studies curriculum conversation. Can we get a round of applause for the Advancement Project for putting on the water cooler? Thank you. When you visit us, Jennifer Peck knows this, when you visit us at the Department of Education, there are no water coolers. So I love being able to come to the water cooler and have conversation with you. I'm deeply grateful for your conversation about how we align what we do in early education through K-12 and through higher education. I believe that for too long, our conversations in our sectors have been forced into unnecessary silos. Been forced because of funding restrictions, been forced to compete for funding rather than see education for what it is, a continuum that starts when our babies are born, and that we should follow them. I'm not going to stop you if you want to applaud. Applausa. That we have to change that narrative, and that we have to fully fund education. For California to be the 5th wealthiest economy in the world, we have no business being 41st in the nation in per pupil spending. If I get nothing done in my time here, I want to work with all of you to make sure that we make our babies number one in how we fund public education in the state of California. You all have clapped 3 times. I feel like I should just stop right now. It's going to be all downhill from here. How's the food? I've been up since 3 a.m. making it. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Truthfully, we should give applause to those who've been serving us, and thank you for their service. To me, I'd say this is a record time for the conversations that the water cooler talks about early education and preschool, about how we align. To have a governor who is talking about preschool for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, who's made a massive investment in early education, who's made a massive investment in what we do at the California Department of Education. It's a great time. I feel like the window is open for us to really be serious about our efforts to promote equity, to close the gap. We've been talking about closing the opportunity gap for decades. We've called it different things for decades. We know that the impacts of poverty and racism and segregation in our schools have had a pervasive impact on many, and they cause us to miss the opportunities of many who could serve our communities, who could serve their families. You know, last week the governor signed a bill that I carried in the legislature, and this year had the opportunity with Assemblymember Bonta to sponsor. And it bans for-profit prisons in the state of California forever. We should be educating, not incarcerating. And to me, that's a step in the right direction. All these things are lining up. A great time for us to really have the conversations that you all are having about alignment, about dual language immersion, and how every student should be able to acquire at least a second language. We know that many young people can acquire multiple languages. We know it supports their brain development. We know that this is a great investment in our schools. We know that this will create global thinkers in the world. And so this is a fabulous time for us to talk about investments. But I believe that timing is everything, right? And so, you know, in my mind, there's this clock ticking. Everyone's like, oh, great, you won the election. In my mind, there's a clock ticking that, you know, you get a very small window of time to bring forward an agenda, to bring people together, and to try and get support. And so while I think this is great timing, I think it's very important for us to be mindful of the time, to be strategic in how we bring forward our ideas, to make sure that we identify all partners who can be helpful, and that we look for all resources. And as we talk about partners, let me just ask, is there anyone in the room from Parent Voices? Wow, I've never, usually they assault me, greet me at all of the events, because they know that my experience, I didn't know anything about early education until I met folks at places like Bananas, and I didn't know what the R&R movement meant. But as a parent, as a new parent, trying hard to find quality childcare for my infant daughter was difficult. We'd found a childcare program that seemed great, but I guess my daughter didn't think it was great, because every day we got reports that she would not eat and that she would cry all the way home. And then one day we found an incredible provider in the community, and I watched my daughter thrive. And that was the beginning for me of learning about many of these issues. And I acknowledge that I'm still learning. Sarah Neville Morgan makes sure every day that I'm learning, right? I do need to shout out our incredible team in the early learning and expanded learning divisions. I know Michael Funk is also here. I see Stephanie Gregson, one of our deputies. We've aligned all of our programs in a new branch that we've asked Sarah to lead, right? And so everyone's like, are you taking her away from early learning programs? Said no, we actually wouldn't want to ever do such a thing. We actually just put together many of the programs that we think have synergy. Nutrition services, our special education programs, our programs for English learners. We just put them together in ways that we think we can build synergy. And then we asked Sarah Neville Morgan to lead it. And thankfully, she said yes. Round of applause. My transition has started as a parent. And then when I made the decision to first run for the assembly, I was invited by an organization called Bananas. They're the R&R program in Alameda County. And it was my first introduction to Parent Voices, and I swear they've been following me around ever since, to the Capitol, and really working with me to help me understand and to help me craft legislation that was passed to expand subsidies for childcare in the state of California. And they would just sort of drill it into me, you know, we want slots and rates. And so it has been a continuous learning process for me as a policymaker, as an advocate. But I'm grateful to everyone in the field who is teaching and sharing and doing the things that we've always known. We've known for decades. We've said for decades that if we invest in early education for every child, that our young people are likely to graduate, more likely to go on to college, less likely to drop out. But yet we've not made the kinds of investments as a system, as a society, to actualize those things that we say. And then we say things like, our kids are our future, they're our priority, but our deeds have not always matched our words. And young people and families have experienced consequences as a result. And so I feel that now is an incredible time for us. We have a governor who gets it. We have some of the best advocates and leaders anywhere. We have great partnership. Resources are beginning to be made available. And I think we have to move in a very strategic way to make sure that we don't miss any opportunity, because there are many young people who depend on us. I spent most of my career working in the nonprofit world, working as a social worker, working with families who experience chronic absenteeism, kids in kindergarten, first grade, second, third, who miss more than 10% of school. And we all know what that impact that has on them. And so to me, I see opportunities to line up all the programs that we do to make sure that our youngest students are getting support, that our older students get intervention. We named the literacy campaign. One of the first things I did when I got to the Department of Education was to declare that we were going to have a statewide literacy campaign. And everybody cheered, and then they said, where's the money coming from? And what we did is we repurposed $1 million from our own operations budget and sent it to 2 of the counties that have some of the biggest challenges in early literacy and literacy overall. And Dr. Stephanie Gregson is helping us to lead that campaign. And last week we were told that we were also selected for a grant that we applied for $37 million to support literacy in our state. We see these as opportunities that can line up. And so when I came to the Department of Education, I just decided that we needed to increase revenue, and we needed to focus our efforts on closing the achievement gap. And even though we didn't have, and we still don't have all the resources that we need, I'm one of those people who believes that sometimes you just have to declare it. You have to claim it. You have to put a marker in the ground, and you have to say things and then hope and pray and do the work to make them happen. And finding the $1 million, getting the grant for $37 million, these are building blocks that are helping us. As upon arrival, I named 13 transition work groups to help us to think about the key issues in education as it relates to closing the achievement gap, early learning, how do we generate more revenue for our schools, special education, dual language immersion, and supporting our English learners. And I want to thank you all who participated in these work groups. It's helping us to create our work plan for the year and where we'll put our focus. And everything runs through the same channel, that we've got to be focused on equity and how we close the gap. And again, without having any resources to do it, we have decided to create 2 new units at the Department of Education. This is where you all come in, because we don't have no money yet, that we are going to create an equity unit to help guide our work. What I love about, what I love about the Department of Education is everyone there views it as their job to be focused on equity and closing the gap. I have people in our facilities division who said, no, we do more, we do more. The nutrition team said, no, we do more. Everyone views it as their work. But I also want us to be intentional. I want us to have an equity division, a unit that helps us to guide our work. With the release of the state test scores last week, there's been a lot of conversation about what else do we need to do. Because while there have been some really great bright spots for some district, the trend over the last few years has been for slight improvement overall, and then slight improvement and decreases in some very key areas for older students in middle school and high school, for African American students, English learners, and others. And so one of the things that I've asked everyone to do is to come together to look at the data for every district in our state, to make sense about what that data, why are those trends playing out that way? and then to use that interpretation and that analysis to drive what we do next. And so I hope that some of you will come to this meeting. It's an open meeting, November the 5th at 11 a.m. We'll be doing a deep data dive. We've invited Linda Darling-Hammond and Ed Truss-West and Professor Pedro Noguera and many others who are going to help us really look deeply into the data and then work with districts to see what help do they need to strengthen their efforts around closing the gap. And so that's been our conversation in the 10 months that I've been at the Department of Education. It's just flying by. Everyone always says, "How is it?" I said, "It's great. All the controversy you can handle." But every day is the same. Every day is an opportunity to talk about how we help students in our state. And every day, I'm just energized because I see students whose experiences were like mine. Many of you know that my story is one of trying to overcome obstacles, and education and great mentors made that happen. Before you is the descendant of slaves from Africa and immigrants from places like Panama, in Colombia, in Jamaica, in Detroit, Michigan, by way of Mississippi. My father was a soldier. He served in Vietnam. I found my father on the internet 10 years ago. My first conversation with him was as an adult, and he talked about the trauma that he experienced in his own life and how that made it difficult for him to reconnect with his family. My mom, who was an immigrant from Panama, was a teacher. She taught in San Jose, and she raised 4 kids by herself, in spite of being very ill. You know, I was thinking about, I wanted to tell you this great story about how I had all these great preschool programs and Head Start programs as a student, but it didn't really go that way. Mostly it was, struggling to find places, my mom struggling to find places to watch her kids because she was sick. But she insisted that we always had a book in our hand. She insisted that we were always reading. I can even remember going to a kind of church preschool program where I had to lie about my age to get in, meaning I had to say I was 2 years older to be into the program, because she insisted that we get a great education. And that has carried me and my siblings for the course of our life. My mother had cancer, and when I was 6 years old, she lost her battle to cancer, and her 4 kids got split up. And 2 of us went to live in Philadelphia, 2 stayed in the Bay Area. The 2, my 5-year-old brother and I, we both ended up on the doorstep of a cousin who we never met until the day we showed up on her doorstep. And so she took us in and raised us, and she too insisted that we would get a great education. When all the kids in my school said they were going to the college prep meeting, guess who else was going to the college prep meeting? I had no idea what that meant, but I'm going. And my cousin, who worked as a nurse's aide and went to school at night to get her AA and to get her BA, she knew that education was that great, equalizer, and that it would make a difference in my life, and it's made a difference for me and my children and for the young people that I've had the pleasure of serving over the course of my career. And so I think about it every single day, that it would have been easy for me as a kid. I was on the free lunch program. All my friends made fun of me for eating the free lunch. I carried an orange ticket that signified I was on the free lunch program. I was so embarrassed. I tried to eat the lunch like this under my desk. And then I became an adult, and I realized everyone in my school was on the free lunch program. I have no idea why it was that way. When I went to the grocery store, I went to the grocery store with a food stamp coupon, right? Not the EBT card, right? It was like a coupon book with a staple at the end of it that would tear when you wanted to get to the line. Boop, he's using coupons on aisle number 7. We shame our families who are in poverty, when in fact we should be lifting them up. And so I hope that you all would join us in our efforts next year to expand a universal breakfast program so that hungry kids don't have to be hungry. We don't need to check your eligibility. We don't need to check your credentials. If you're hungry, we should feed you. We should create a space where you can come to school and get a meal, be in a structured space, get additional enrichment if you need it, And so my experience has been trying to overcome these programs. I know you all heard about the government cheese. You know, no. You've heard me say it. I ate so much government cheese, I really thought that USDA was a brand name. I did. And for those of you who don't know, it's like a box about a foot long, a block of cheese wrapped in this super thick plastic. I think it was wrapped in Kryptonian because you couldn't get through it. But if you could get through those layers, that was a meal. And it was a great grilled cheese sandwich or quesadilla. And these are programs that help my family to overcome poverty. But the most important public program I've had access to was getting a great public education. And I'm conscious that I would have ended up, I could have easily ended up in California's prison system. Instead, I ended up as California State Superintendent. I want us to give that to all of our kids in the state of California. And so, I'm looking forward to what comes out of your time here. You know, please help us prioritize where we put our focus. As I said, I believe that the window is open for great things to happen, but I also believe that it's all about timing. We have to take advantage of that timing. We find ourselves in an environment where there's so many distractions. You know, the way public discourse takes place now is all about who wants to tweet it out first. You know, who wants to be first to deliver breaking news. And so what we've had is a breakdown in public discourse. And I believe that there are people who don't understand that we need to double down in how we invest in our public education systems, that we need to double down that we should never, ever, ever, ever allow a parent to say no to a raise on their job because they were afraid that they wouldn't qualify for a subsidized child care program. That's a false choice. That we should act swiftly with equity to support all of our students, that they have the resources, that they can learn to read, that they have access to learning about the careers of the future. The other unit that we're going to create is a new STEAM unit, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Because we believe, yes, we got the arts in there too, because we believe that our students need to have access to these things in career technical education. I was just saying to people that I was the kind of student who, you know, if you made me sit there and listen to you for 45 minutes, yeah, I might do it. But if you gave me a hands-on opportunity, a chance to learn, to see how the learning was practical, it made a big difference. My students that I've had the pleasure of teaching have almost all come from the probation system and from the juvenile camp. That's hard for me to get my mind around that we allow our students to take their diplomas in juvenile camps, but they do nonetheless. But one of the most fulfilling things I've had is the opportunity to teach a civics course to young men and women who are in the juvenile justice system, to bring them to the state capitol, to have them work with me to develop legislation that actually helps them move kids out of the juvenile justice system, and then to put those young people on the dais in the California state legislature so that they can see that with hard work and support that they can be serving here as well. No one in my family ever served in politics, ever. No one in my family ever ran for office. I never dreamed that I'd have the opportunity to do the wonderful things that I've been blessed to be able to do. And I know that I would not be doing it if it weren't for great people like yourself who insisted on early education and literacy and dual language immersion programs and improving how we deliver special education and making sure that we know every student by name and giving them a great opportunity for support. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for in advance for what you're going to share. I'm looking forward to the great work that we'll do to align our systems to help every of the 6 million students in our state. Thank you so much. Camille just did this to me. Questions? I see you. I was trying to make my escape. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes, hi.
We have a mic coming.
Thanks. I'm Peggy Pizzo from Stanford Graduate School of Education, and we want to thank you very much for your service, both in the legislature and now in the Department of Education as their leader. We know in early care and education, we have a model which research has shown for many years is very effective, and that's the Head Start model, which brings together health and mental health and nutrition, as you're trying to do with the school breakfast program. Thank you for that. And family support and engagement, and attention to early detection and remediation of special needs. What are your thoughts about how California can move forward integrating health, mental health, nutrition, family engagement, and early detection and remediation more closely into our state preschool and general child care and alternative payment voucher programs?
Well, thank you for that easy question.
Sorry.
I knew I was being set up when she said, I want to thank you for, and then usually there's something coming right after. But, I think there are many pieces to your question, at least in my mind. And one is, what do we do to change, guidelines and make it easier for families to enter into Head Start programs, to get access to public assistance programs? We need a whole new shift in the narrative about how we talk about support for our families. Most of my experience has been in trying to pass legislation to get school-based mental health programs for 4 years. For 4 years, I introduced the bill to expand school-based mental health, and every year, my least favorite committee, the Appropriations Committee, basically said, this costs too much. And I've always said, what's the cost to not providing support? Right now, we're seeing higher rates of suicide for many of our students. We're seeing higher rates of bullying for many of our students. And I just believe that we need an integrated system that looks at school-based mental health, addresses health needs, whether they be physical health, dental issues, mental health, and social services needs. And so every year, I've worked on things like expanding community schools, and because Jennifer Peck told me I better say that, but she showed me how to do it. She runs a great nonprofit that has prioritized community schools programs, and I believe in it. I think we might have to come at it in a different way this year and just say every school should have access to nurses and social workers and psychologists, and just figure out ways to help school districts get those resources. I sat down at lunch after giving a speech last week with a bunch of school-based nurses, and they were like, we got you. And they basically said, we have a proposal for you. We want money for nurses in our schools because we're seeing an increase in the rise of juvenile diabetes and other needs. But they said, we don't want one-time funding. They said, we want ongoing funding. And so I think there are parallels that we have to do, is figure out how to provide more of these programs in our schools and early education, but also figure out how to pay for it. And I know this isn't a political event, but I'll just tell you all that I anticipate there are all these measures being proposed to be on the state ballot to help increase permanent revenue for our state. And I can support any of them. I'm not going to debate which one's merit is better. I will campaign for each of them, both of them, any others that come up, because I believe that things have a cost. And there's a cost to not funding these programs. When I came to the legislature as a social worker, all I could think about is everything that had been cut in my professional lifetime. Programs for foster youth, for seniors, for people with disabilities. And so when I got here, everyone said, don't ever ask for any bill that costs money. And forgive my language, I said, that's a dumb idea. Why would I do that? And because to me, there's a cost to provide quality services, and there's a cost to not provide it. And so I'm committed to that. I worked 5 years before coming to Sacramento for a school-based mental health organization. And so on day one, my staff said that they had a special office for me, and I asked, why is it so special? They said that you're being assigned to the office with the number 5150 on that office. And I thought, how is it that the only person who worked in mental health in the legislature was being assigned to 5150? I took that as a badge of courage, that we were going to lift the stigma around treating mental health, and every year ask for a bill for school-based mental health. And I got to thank our governor. Our governor put in the budget for this year $50 million for school-based mental health to support our students. And so, thank you. I think I'm getting the hook. They're like, no, you were way past your time. Are there any other questions?
Hi, Lupe Hyman Milam from Fresno County Superintendent of Schools.
Hi.
And so, hi, so excited to see you speak and continuing to lead the way for us in regards to early care and education and bridging the K-12 together. As we're doing this work together, I can't help but to think about our wages for our women of color working in our 0 to 5 sector. I know we have had many discussions, and at one point we even talked about slots versus, wages, which I don't believe we have to give up both. Being aspirational in this world, we have to have both. And so moving forward then, how can we prioritize? I know there was a coalition that came together, did a year proposal. Now it's become a 2-year, but I don't want to give up that effort. And I just believe that that is key in our infrastructure to be able to support our youngest learners and being able to make sure that they are ready, to continue to take on the world. And our obligation to support them is putting our value into, like you mentioned, cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do, and I agree with you. We should not have, it's a false choice to have to choose between increasing, rates and slots. And for us to ask those who care for our kids, that's where I think the hypocrisy comes into our system. We say that our kids are our most precious resources, but then consistently we underpay those who care for our most precious resources all along the continuum, from early education through K-12 education through higher education. We have to correct that. We have to close that discrepancy. How many of you worked on AB 378? Just a few. And so this is a bill that gives power to many of the women who run small child care programs, who struggle to keep their doors open in their programs. It gives them some power. It gives them power to organize collectively. And that's to say that they deserve better wages, that they deserve better training, that they deserve respect and dignity. This is a profession, right? And we should treat it with respect and dignity. Now, I'm committed to that. Now, I got to ask my staff, did anybody bring the big state checkbook? Probably not. And so I can't just quickly write a check to say we'll make it better, but I believe that there are efforts underway to move incrementally to increasing wages and training and focusing on quality of care. We know that we've got to focus on our workforce and building a pipeline of those who want to work in early education and care. And I'm interested in working with you all. This year, I asked the governor to support a teacher housing bill that he supported and funded in the budget, because in the K-12 space, we lose teachers who simply can't afford to live where they work. And so we'll never close the achievement gap if we keep losing teachers at the rate that we do. By the way, this bill focuses on both teachers and classified staff, that they would get support for affordable housing. We have programs in the state that will allow someone who is a first-time home buyer in education to also get support. And so I believe that we've got to be creative. We have to improve wages. We have to improve training. And I think that goes hand in hand with the efforts that I mentioned to increase permanent revenue for education in the state. The reason I keep saying permanent is because I was on a school board in 2008 when the economy was really bad, and I thought I was going to the school board to do good things for kids. And everyone said, well, our economy is so bad, all we can do is make cuts. They asked me to vote to close 10 schools on my very first night at the school board. I about passed out. And I said, this is not what I came here to do. And they said this, I'll never forget it. They said, we know what we're asking you to do is bad for kids, but we need you to do it anyway. I struggled with that. And I said, if it's bad for kids, we have no business doing it. We should have the political will to do what's right for kids. Now, I got lucky. When I said that, I didn't have a plan. But I figured if we're in trouble, everybody should be in trouble together. And we have 5 cities in our unified school district. And I suggested we pull them all together for a conversation about funding all of our kids, theirs and ours. And many of those cities brought forward millions of dollars that helped us to keep nearly half of those schools open. And so I think we have to work together to have the political will to provide permanent funding in education, support for those who care for our kids, and we're happy to work with you in Fresno and any other part of the state. Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Well, apparently my time is up. I'm getting the hook. You all have been great. Look forward to working with you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.